counting. Maybe it doesn't count. But okay, if we
It says
assume,
record
okay, it's recording, no count, no volume test. But if we're talking at this level,
microphone check.
second microphone check. Yeah.
Yeah. You ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Okay. So, as you know, my name is Winter Jackson, and I'm a student at the Communiversity College of Law, and as a part of our U.S. Law class, we're to do community-based service learning, and through interviewing ex-inmates as part of the C Numbers campaign, we are to understand more intimately your experience as an ex-prisoner and perhaps find out how racism played a role in that, but above and beyond in terms of the C Numbers campaign, how your life experiences have changed before, during, and after imprisonment.
Okay. All right, my name is James Sayles. Technically, I'm still a C member.
Okay.
I'm on parole, and I'm still under the custody of the Department of Corrections. So I agreed to participate in this program because I think it will help everyone, but maybe the Prisoner Review Board in particular, understand the need to reevaluate their perspective on C numbers or prisoners with indeterminate sentences who are still coming up for parole. I'm not going to say that everybody who's still in, that every C number, that every indeterminately sentenced prisoner should be out, but I think the vast majority of them should be out because from the ones that I know personally, I know that, you know, they're older men, they've definitely transformed themselves, they're no longer threats to society, and they can make positive contributions to society. A lot of the guys that I know are interested in working with children, with juveniles, because they know the lack of, say, role models or certain kind of mentoring that played a role in their imprisonment. And so they want to try to help as many people, as many young people as they can from following the path that they went down. And so that's why I'm here.
Okay. So, and through this interview, we can show how maybe you and other C number inmates, like you said, can be examples to show the Prison Review Board how you can transition from the prison system, how you can successfully re-enter society.
Okay.
So we want to talk about first your environment, I guess as a youth, and your environment, how that's connected to the first time you were introduced to the criminal justice system.
Okay. That's a kind of long story, but I'll try to keep it short. I guess I was raised primarily by my mother and grandmother up until I was 13 years old. To me, one of the things I reflect back on now is the first time I stayed out all night. I stayed out real late one night. I got scared to go home, and I just, you know, I was so scared to go home, I just stayed out. And the next day, my mother and my grandmother were looking for me. They found me, and I expected to get severely punished, but they didn't. And I always look back on that now, because once after that, I began to stay out all night, all the time. And I just, you know, the streets had me from that point, in short. So I look back on that as a point. If I had have been severely punished, I don't think I would have followed the road that I did. You know what I mean? But I thought I got away with something, and you know, so that was shortly after that. It might have been that same summer. I got incarcerated for the first time. I was 13 years old. And while I was incarcerated, my mother died.
13?
Yeah, I was 13. She was 32 at the time. She was a drug addict, and I think it was, maybe they weren't calling it AIDS then, but it was like something wrong with the liver, hepatitis, some liver or something. But so, and from that point, I was raised by my grandmother. But again, the streets had me. So after then, I was always in the street, and that's the short of it. So from the time I was 13 until 17 or 18, I got my first adult offense. So every year between 1962 and 1968, I spent some part of those years in juvenile facilities or adult facilities. My first adult conviction was 67. I did 11 months for an armed robbery, and well, I was sentenced to 18 months. I did 11 months. I was released November 68. From then, I stayed out until August of 71 when I caught the case that I was just released on.
So what do you think could have happened when you were in and out ever since 13 that would have let you know or reaffirmed what our criminal justice system says it does, that it's a rehabilitative deterrent? So since you were introduced at 13, somewhere along the line, we would like to think as society and perhaps as law students that you would have known or you'd have learned your lesson, so to speak. What do you think could have happened at that age that would have stopped you from currently now being a C number?
Well, I think from the juvenile system of even into the adult situation, adult prison. I know, years ago the thing was that people said rehabilitation had failed. But to me, there was no real attempt to try rehabilitation. As a juvenile, I say in and out of the system, there was no counseling, especially a mandatory counseling like thing where everybody gets some kind of attention to find out, who are you, why are you here, to try to give you some guidance, in terms of really transforming yourself and making a change, a positive change in your life. You went into the system and you worked, or you might have went to school, and those things were available to you. But even in that process, it was you just here. You know what I mean? To me, there has to be some conscious effort made on the part of correctional officials, or to actually get inside people's heads, and change what's in their heads, and then give them some other kinds of opportunities to exercise, or begin to actually live or develop a new way of life. And guys, my experience is that people have to do that on their own if you really want to, because you don't get any kind of inspiration, from the Department of Corrections or from the juvenile department. That's in short, I guess. But yes, I think if I'd had that, I could have, even if it didn't work immediately, you know what I mean? Because I reflect back on certain things certain people said to me at certain points in time. These are the kinds of things that I used later on to help me. But so if you never have anyone, saying those kinds of things to you, trying to point out, that you're going in the wrong direction and what you may need to do in order to go in the right direction, you're just totally lost. And you'll always be lost, and you'll never have anything to reflect back on as a kind of rudder, or, so you need that kind of stuff. And just because, you don't, if I try to advise somebody and I don't see any immediate transformation, doesn't mean that it's not working or that it won't work, or that what I'm saying to them is not going to be useful at some point, so, and I really don't see that happening. Again, individuals, it's not part of a systematic program, some individuals as part of that program might give you a little something,
So do you think it would be different if the juvenile that went in was white versus a black person?
A lot of factors would probably play into it, because I think on average, I guess most of the white guys I know had more education than most of the black guys I know. Your upbringing, you know, like again, my family was, I guess, with a female-headed household, and there probably are white guys who come from female-headed households, but I would think that the majority don't. And whatever it might, I can't, you know, speak on, you know, what it is that allows guys, white guys in particular, who I guess we're talking about now, who have, you know, a two-parent homes, a nice little income, and going to good schools, they got a nice education, what it is that makes them go the wrong way, you know. But I think I'm all, you know, certain that most of the guys I know didn't finish school, didn't have two-parent families, no kind of male role model. They were all single, you know, female-headed households, and were raised in the streets. You know what I mean?
And so what this might sound like to me, from someone who doesn't have any background, is like, well, the criminal justice system, juvenile or adult, can't correct those problems. But what I've learned from my law school classes, and particularly my juvenile classes, is that is the whole purpose of the juvenile system. It is supposed to, juveniles don't obtain all of the rights that adults do pursuant to our Constitution, because we want a flexible system by which treatment can be given to juveniles.
Right.
So perhaps we see links between a prisoner's juvenile life and the adult.
Right.
So maybe that's something, you know.
Yeah, you definitely, and I think, you know, today you have, they're rather innovative kind of programs and scattered, you know, throughout the country, where people are, some of it might come under the name of what they call restorative justice now. And especially, on one hand, you know, you're talking about just the individual, the offender and the victim and people from the community who come around to, you know, to deal with that situation, and on a broader level to deal with trying to restore the entire community, because it's not just, you know, the individual that's in trouble, the community is in trouble, and so that whole community needs healing, you know what I mean? So, you know, so things, you know, there are good signs that people are really beginning to know, like rehabilitation is something that really needs to be focused on again, because it's necessary. It can work if you want to put the necessary financial resources. One of the reasons that they claimed it wasn't working before was that they just didn't want to put the money into it that was necessary. Budgets got tight, you know, and budgets are still tight, but at the same time, you know, the prison population is constantly rising, you know. Communities are constantly deteriorating. You know, more and more people, more and more black people in particular, proportionately are going to prison or getting involved in the criminal justice system. I was at, so, you know, I was dealing with some kids, I was dealing with some kids the other day, maybe 40 to 50 kids, and the question was asked, how many of you know somebody who is in prison? And almost everybody raised their hand. You know, this was a neighborhood on the south side, but I think, you know, you go to a lot of other neighborhoods and you pick 40 to 50 kids and ask them if they have anybody or know anybody who's in prison, you're going to get a lot of hands raised, you know. And so that's a reflection about what's happening to the community, not just that you got like a lot of offenders, you know, jumping up, or that you got crime, but you know, that community is in bad shape. Okay,
So was there, I guess this may be a question that we need to, I was going to say, was there anything that imprisonment, be it a juvenile or as an adult, made you look at yourself and want to change something about you? Did it make you become introspective and look at yourself? And is the, like you said, you think it's mostly the individual that decides to do that.
Right.
But is there anything that you can point to in the institution? Because it's the institution that claims or that society relies on to help offenders or rehabilitate.
Well, no. Personally, I have to say no.
No.
No. I think even like I say, even if I didn't, make a complete reversal, every step I made, I think, along some positive direction. Starting to read in prison. Trying to, all of that. Nobody came to me and said, "Hey, man, why don't you start reading a little bit more?" There are other worlds available to you through books. Nobody said anything like that to me. Or if I picked it up somewhere, it was, it was outside of the institutional framework. You know what I mean? I might have been watching TV or something. Or I might have been reading something else, and that's what I was reading. They say, read more, and the world opens up to you or something, or new worlds open up to you or something. I was inspired by that, and then things I started to read. So, and again, like I said, I didn't, just automatically start to walk that righteous path. I still, but at the same time, I had something that allowed that's the foundation that I was standing on when I really made that major, decision that, hey, this is not what I want to do for the rest of my life or with the rest of my life, so that's it.
So we can move into your experience that, or the when you were in as a C member.
Okay.
NA. Can you point to your best experience there and how that was symbolic?
Best, best experience. I think best experience would have to do with family stuff. I had a serious offense a long time, and I had 2 children. I wasn't married, but my children's mother, she got married while I was in, but all of the time I was in, she made sure that I maintained ties with my children. If she didn't bring them down herself, she would let other of my family members, my brother or my sister or other friends, bring them down. So throughout my entire incarceration, and when I got arrested, it's important, I think, my daughter, who's the oldest, she was like 11 months, 2 weeks old. I got arrested 2 weeks before her first birthday. So she really, she didn't know anything about me. And my son, like a year younger than her, she was pregnant with him when I got arrested. And first time I saw him was in the courtroom. So my whole relationship with them has been, through bars. But I think it's been, it's been a very fruitful and close relationship. And I think I've had a positive influence on them,
Can you talk about that?
Can I talk about it? Well, my son has never been to jail, and there are a lot of other males in his family. He got 5 or 6 other brothers. He got, cousins, 3 or 4 cousins. All of them have been locked up, but he hasn't. He's come closer than anybody else to actually getting the college degree. He did run into an obstacle. He waited, I think, a couple of months before he was to get his bachelor's. He was going to Arkansas State. He played ball, and that was related to his marital relationship. He had got married, and he had hoop dreams. And I think he had some kind of conflict with not being able to pursue hoop dreams and trying to maintain a marriage, and he couldn't handle it, so he didn't finish school. But he's back in school now. My daughter, again, all of her sisters, a couple of them have been to jail, or they had drug problems, or they used drugs heavily, and she hasn't. And I mean, I think a lot of people just, comment on that fact that out of her mother had 11 children altogether, and I said a couple of her nephews, all 3 nephews. She had a sister who died in the early 70s. She had 3 sons, so all of her 3 sons have been locked up. So, you know, I guess I just like to think that I had something to do with the fact that their lives aren't any worse than they are. You know, so
that's a lot.
Yeah.
Can you tell about what was it like when you first went in to prison and some of the changes that you saw there for being there for so long?
You mean in terms of the prison system changes? Oh, man.
Or just
No, it's
not structural changes, but changes in terms of you just see progression or regression and just the systematic institutional thing.
Yeah, well, you know, regression. You know, again, even though there wasn't a conscious. Here's the thing. It used to be like when you come into the system, they give you a rule book. Even now, back then they used to give you a rule book, and there were signs. I guess Stateville and Pontiac, and you know they didn't have as many prisons in the early 70s. But okay, they used to advise you to say, do your own time. Don't just do time, but let time serve you, or don't serve time, let time serve you. All right, maybe I have to correct myself earlier. Maybe that is a conscious orientation from the institution to, you know, encourage you to change your life. But, you know, other than that, you know, but there's none of that today, or very little of that today. The kinds of programs that used to exist in the 70s have been discontinued. A lot of the schooling has been discontinued.
So what changes did you see from in the inmates that reflected the changes in the institution?
Oh, in the inmates.
Less education, less programs, less schooling. And what did that mean for inmates?
It means that they watch more TV and they play more basketball, and especially now, one of the biggest influences has been the move from indeterminate to determinate sentencing, because guys with determinate sentences tend not to have any incentive to change or to do anything. And so it's just they know when they're getting out, they know they come in, if I got, you know, whatever it is, 10, 20 years to do, very few of those guys actually try. Now they do, and again, we're talking on the system-wide level. Any joint probably has 2,000 to 3,000 people in it. So waiting lists for GED programs, vocational school stuff, any programs that are offered, that are still offered by certain institutions. And I'm not totally familiar with everything that's going on in all these institutions, but I know that a lot of them nowadays, they lock you up 16, 18 hours a day, and you know, so there's not a lot of room there for going to school or for, you know, attending any kind of vocational classes. You're just locked up, and that's the program. You know, I think they call it 18-6 or something. You know, that's what they do. So certain joints are like that, and certain ones like Dixon, where I left, still have something that people can get into if they want to. But
so what I hear you saying is, through your 30s, about 34 years?
33 years, 7 months on this case. Yeah.
Okay. 33 years in prison, you saw a regression in programs, educational programs.
Right.
So there was an incentive to better yourself because that may increase your chances of living. At the same same for the determined and indeterminate. If I know I have 20 years, why participate in programs? Because I know regardless I'm getting out in 20 years. Or if the programs aren't even there, that's sort of a double whammy.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So tell me about your experience specifically, because you did get a degree.
Yeah.
So
Well,
tell me more about that.
Again, I was interested in reading. I was interested in learning, and when I caught this case, I was socially, politically active, and those were the people. Once I got locked up in Pontiac, leaving Pontiac or being in Pontiac is where I became politically conscious and active on some either a very naive kind of way, and I carried that outside, but it was like I still had one foot in the street, and was trying to firmly plant this other foot, I don't know what's the opposite of the street, being proactive, and so it was that other negative influence pulled me, and again, it's not, ideally I could say I wish I had whatever was necessary to say, hey, I'm not going that way today, and to make a decision to go some other way. But, I did go that other way because I hadn't totally made the transition or stepped over the fence at that point. And that other influence was enough to pull me back. So once I did get in prison from this, I began to make the decision that I wanted to pull both legs over, even though it seemed that it might be kind of late. So my first thing was to try to get out. I want to get out, and then it became, even though I'm not out, even though I'm here, I still want to be the best person I can be. And I think I was saying that before the Army took it on as a slogan, be all you can be stuff. But so that was me from that point. And again, there were different periods throughout that 33 years where I made like qualitative kind of jumps or leaps or something, But like when I first went in, I was lying about why I was there. It was like a COINTEL. You know about COINTELPRO? You ever heard? You got COINTELPRO is commonly linked just to the FBI. It's like COINTELPRO is what an acronym for counterintelligence program, and that was the FBI's program against Martin Luther King, Elijah Muhammad. They would spy. They would use wiretaps. They would try to discredit, organizations and individuals to try to undermine the civil rights movement or the Black Power movement and that kind of stuff. So, excuse me. So, in that, they actually framed people, and so I jumped on that bandwagon. And when I caught this case, my first thing was to lie and say, "Hey, I'm being framed.
Okay.
I didn't do this. They set me up." Okay. So it took me a couple of years to get past that, and to really come clean with myself and with my family and with everybody else to say, yeah, well, I've been lying. I did do this, and so I had to come clean with everybody else even before I did that with the board. So, because my first couple of appearances before the board, I was doing the frame-up tip. I didn't do it, and I'm being framed. And I think it was only a couple of years. I went to the board the first time in '80, I think. So I think by '83, so maybe my third appearance before the board, I was saying, yeah, I did it, totally remorseful, sorry, and, that's it. But what inspired me had a lot to do with my children, because I didn't want, they getting older, and I didn't want to keep lying to them. They started asking me why I'm here, and So I didn't want to be lying to them, and I didn't want it. I didn't want them. I thought that it would help them not follow that path.
Not being honest.
Right.
So what I'm hearing
And not blaming the system for
taking responsibility for your own actions.
Right.
So coupled with programs and incentives and institutions, the individual, which the institution really can't make you do, it makes you be accountable for your behavior. It makes you see if you are guilty, that you committed the crime. And so let's move on from here. And that's where the true, I guess, rehabilitation comes into play. But that's a personal thing. However, if you want to do that, for example, let's say this happened a year ago, and this is at the point you were at, the institution does not provide you with any outlet by which to get to that point. Or
okay, well look.
So when you got to this point, where there are programs, you need some water?
No, just maybe I'm cool.
Okay.
But
where there are programs that you can take advantage of with your new mindset?
no, because
So
you know the thing at this point. Oh, well, I got the degree in '88.
Was it from the institution office?
Yeah, that but okay, well, I get Northern at that point. Northern Illinois University had a program. This was short-lived because back then you used to be able to get Pell Grants. The Pell Grant program was operating, so we would go, get a Pell Grant, and that would help pay for the college thing. And more as budgets get tight, and state budgets, school budgets get tight, they started cutting back on those programs. They cut back on the Pell. The federal government cut back on the Pell Grant thing first, and that made everything else tighter. So. And I mean, like even now in Dixon, I think Roosevelt is still going to Dixon. So I mean, and again, but not all institutions, to the best of my knowledge, have college programs operating. I might be wrong. Maybe that's something we need to check out. But I don't think all institutions have those college programs operating. So, but it's like to us, especially since we're talking about C numbers and the indeterminately sentenced prisoners now. The thing, at the time I get convicted, I know this is kind of like a legal argument, but it's other than just a legal argument. This is like moral, and this is like what's right. Legally, we were sentenced and convicted. We committed our offenses at a time when. The law in Illinois and a lot of other states across the country was an indeterminately sentenced law. And part of that law was the underlying philosophy of rehabilitation, which implied that once you demonstrate it, there's a Supreme Court case where they run this down saying, you get a minimum sentence, you get a maximum sentence. And they say the minimum sentence is to satisfy society's desire for punishment. So once you do your minimum sentence, you satisfy society's desire for punishment. It's not supposed to be about punishment anymore. From that point, it's on you in terms of whether or not you get out or how soon you get out. If you demonstrate once you serve your minimum that you're no longer a threat to society, then parole is almost a given. And that's the way it operated in Illinois up until 1978. Very few people would go to the board more than 3 times, no matter what your offense. The recidivist rate for murderers was still low, so even, murderers were being paroled on their first, second, third time up. The average sentence served, the average length of time served in Illinois up to the mid-70s was like anywhere between 11, 9, 12, 13 years. Once they passed this new determinate sentencing law, the determinate sentencing law had its own philosophy, which was, had nothing to do with the philosophy underlying the rehabilitation thing. But what everybody, the board in particular, began to do was to superimpose that philosophy onto the cases that they began to review of those people who were sentenced under the old law. They made it about punishment. when it was no longer supposed to be about punishment. Even though guys were sentenced for serious offenses, they still should have been judged according to the philosophy and the standards that they were sentencing, that were in existence when they were sentenced. And that's the thing, we're trying to deal with it. If in 83, yeah, it was as early as 83, I had a board member tell me that she thought, and she didn't say she said we believe you are rehabilitated. We believe that you can go to the street and not commit any more crimes. But, so I'm saying, okay, okay, you had a serious offense, we want to punish you some more. Even though we believe you're rehabilitated and we don't think you're a danger to commit any more crimes. And that was how long was that, 20 years ago? So it's like I did 20 years, and the whole rehabilitation thing, one other board member a couple of years later said that, you've gone through, or you've undergone a metamorphosis, and that's like, that's a new person, you know what I'm saying? So once you recognize that I'm a new person, I'm a different person, I'm no longer the person that did this, in that sense, and now you're punishing like an innocent man or something, So it's just and again, we're not saying that everybody has to be released, that all C numbers should be released, but if you can make the determination, if you're a board member or if you are the entire board and you can interview somebody or you look at their cases and you feel like they're no longer a threat to society, then that should be what motivates you to determine whether or not you release them on parole and not just how serious their offense was, especially after they done did 25, 30, 35 years, which is what everybody is kind of getting to now. And all the other factors like that, people sentenced under the new law for murders tend to serve less time than the C numbers are serving now. It's just so, our slogan, it's about fairness, too, at this point. I might have got off track. You think I didn't get off track? Okay.
What was the hardest thing you had to confront coming back out of prison after 33 years?
Well, it's not the newness of it all. It's a certain dependency, I think. That might have been overall hardest because it's hard to get a job. When I came home, and I guess a lot of C members would face this situation in particular because, if you're convicted under the new law, you got to outdate. You know when you're coming home. 20 years, you can look 20 years down the road and say, I know I'm getting out on such and such a date. You can plan, you know what I mean? C members can't plan. Their families can't plan, You never know from one, you go to the board every year, if you're lucky, 2 or 3 years, and you're always hoping that you make it. And each time you go, you try to make whatever plans you can, because you have to have a parole plan when you come up, and you can say, I'm going to stay with family, tell them where you're going to live, if you got a job, stuff like that. Now, and again, I come from a poor family, so I couldn't stay with any of my family members. So I was fortunate to have some friends who would let me stay with them. But a lot of other guys are kind of like in that situation there. I mean, they get out, they might, if they stay with family, they're sleeping on the couch or they're sleeping on the floor. It's not, it's not an ideal living situation that they're going to. Some guys come out with jobs waiting for them. Not everybody does. Some guys get out and can find jobs through a little network. There's kind of like a relatively informal kind of network among a lot of C members, because lots of C members have got good jobs and good positions and know people. There's a little network going. And so if you can hook into that, you might be able to find something relatively easy. But coming right out of the joint, and even, the stuff that they give you when you come out, a parole officer gave me a referral slip to check out 2 or 3 places, and I went to those 2 or 3 places, and when I got there, those 2 or 3 places, especially the Safer Foundation, they said, we can't do nothing for you, which I couldn't, understand, but So, I mean, it's hard. And other kinds of preparation. Guys under the new law, they got what they call a pre-start program. A couple of months before they get out, they go into this program that lasts a couple of weeks. They tell them about ID and where they might be able to go for job referrals and housing and clothing and other kinds of services that might be available. We don't get that. We don't get a pre-start thing. And again, because, we go to the parole board, if we find out we make parole, we might leave as early as the next day, relatively soon, but we don't get a pre-start. So that's one of the things people out here are doing now, trying to put together some resources for, ideally, people should have that kind of stuff. They should have a little resource manual coming out of the door, but so yeah, that, that certain dependency, the newness of things, buses talk, I heard one guy said buses talk, and the city has changed, This is not the city that I knew when, this is not the city that existed when I left. So I got to get used to the city all over again. And people talk to me about, you go to here and you go there, and they expect me to know, what they're talking about and where I'm going and where these places are, and I don't. So I've been using maps a lot, I think that's, and social kind of stuff. Talking, on one hand, I guess but it takes me a while in crowds, because I tended, especially the last couple of years, I tended to spend a lot of time in my unit or in my cell, and so dealing with crowds is kind of, strange. And there's like if you do a lot of time, I think, if you do a lot of time, and especially if you're trying to stay out of trouble, that means that you have to suppress a lot of yourself. You have to, if you're dealing with a correctional officer or some other person in authority, because the rule inside, the officer is always right. No matter what he says, you're supposed to follow his instructions. And then, later on, you're supposed to have an opportunity to challenge that. But, somebody tells me to do something and I know it's wrong right at that point, I run the risk of getting a ticket, getting in this incident report or something, simply if I just speak my mind about that. Because that officer, he can just not like the fact that I spoke up, you know what I'm saying? And he can lie, and then it's my word against his, which a lot of tickets, very, very few officers write tickets and describe the incident exactly the way it happened. That's my experience. So they always embellish. And but if you go for a long time doing that, you bring that out here with you. I describe it as like lacking a certain kind of maturity. Like, I've grown up over the last 33 years in this little structured kind of environment that didn't really allow me to fully express myself and to fully develop, as a mature adult. You know what I mean? So I'm coming out here now, and so that's I think that's part of the kind of dependency thing. So the way you deal with, I might still tend to deal with authority figures in that certain kind of way, still suppressing myself. And I don't mean anything violent or, but just I might hesitate to speak my mind, So I think that might be systemic, characteristic of a lot of guys, who've doing a lot of time. And again, not everybody, I don't think, but, because there are guys inside that I used to admire because they could always speak up, but I didn't, my thing was to avoid trouble at all costs, all kinds of trouble, especially because, like with the board, the thing, I don't want to give the board any excuse for denying my parole at any point in time. So I don't want to have to go out there and they say, oh, well, we're going to, deny you this time because you got 2 tickets last year, so I don't want no tickets. That was my thing.
Are you more comfortable outside now, or are you still adjusting?
I'm still adjusting, but I'm also more comfortable, you know.
So what progression have you seen? I give an example of when it was really itchy, and now you feel more comfortable.
Well, I got a part-time job, and I'm working with people around this guy's case. The guy got a death penalty case in Indiana, so doing that kind of work is kind of stabilizing and aids with the transition, because it's another kind of responsibility and different level of interaction with people. The work is beginning to allow me to save some money. You know, ideally not as much, but to save some money, because I'm still staying with friends, but at one point, you know, I got to find a place of my own. A friend of mine has let me offer the use of his car, you know, so I went and got a driving permit, and I've been, you know, practicing my driving, so at some point, you know, relatively soon, I'll have my license, and I'll be able to get around more on my own, you know. That's real good, especially if I'm doing a lot of stuff. You know, you need your own car. I need my car, you know.
So what are some of the accomplishments and things that you've done since you've been out?
Since I've been out? Man.
Let's stop and pause for a second.
Okay.
Okay, so going back to some of your accomplishments, can you talk about something?
We recording now?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, all right.
Can you talk about some things that you've done prior to parole?
Prior to parole. You mean relatively close to, not over the whole 33 years?
No.
Well, I guess I couldn't give you an exact, last few years have been primarily devoted to trying to get out. And in relation to that, it's been doing work around the board, around what has become the C-Number campaign. Some of the people involved in the C-Number campaign got involved or actually developed the campaign out of the process of trying to get me out. Some of the, you know, so that's the C-Number campaign developed after trying to get me out. And I was working with that campaign while I was inside, and has been working with it since I got out. I started studying law, and I guess I was a jailhouse lawyer, something of a jailhouse lawyer, since the mid-'70s. I started learning law, dealing with the law around my conviction, and then it kind of transitioned from my conviction to civil rights stuff, and civil rights of the 1983 type stuff, civil human rights type stuff, conditions in prisons, health care, a lot, what now would just call almost the whole panoply or whatever of, you know, prisons and prisoners' rights inside, combined with a greater interest in applying what you told me something. One of the areas you wanted to go in public interest law, public service law, or something like that. Things like that. That's because you know, women's abuse, all kind of abuse for women and children is a concern. Juvenile stuff is a concern. Just, you know, juveniles relative. These were concerns before I got out, and they become, especially the juvenile stuff, has become more of a concern since I've been out. Since I've been out, I applied for a grant. There's a Soros Foundation. It's like a Justice Foundation, Justice Institute. I applied for a grant to do a study about indeterminate sentencing and rehabilitation on a national level. And in the process of gathering information about that, I ran into somebody like prior recipients of this fellowship, and one of them is doing juvenile justice stuff, restorative justice stuff with juveniles. And so conversations with her and other things has got me interested in that. And I've run into a lot that, it's a big thing out here now. So I'm constantly running into people who have an interest in that area. Most recently, I ran into a woman who's part of the Great Destinations program. She's a coordinator for Great Destinations program run by the city. And she has 8 sites around the city dealing with juveniles between 11 and 13 or 14. She invited us, the C-Number campaign, to speak to these children about why they should stop throwing rocks, as we call it, at prisons. Men and or boys and girls. So my first
What
one.
do you mean throwing rocks?
Throwing rocks is that's like slang out here now. Means that you want to go. You're doing things that will send you to prison.
Okay.
So a lot of young guys, but young girls too, are doing things that will wind them up in prison. And so, like last Thursday was my first engagement with some of these children. I got another one tomorrow on the west side, and so there'll probably be a couple more just with this program. But now it's possible. I can either work with other people with existing programs, or it's also possible that we can start like a juvenile outreach program through the C-Number campaign. So there's a lot of possibilities. That's one of the things. Yeah, I'm busy. I got, again, a part-time job. I work for a law professor at Northwestern University. I'm doing research for him. I'm volunteering with one of the lawyers at the People's Law Office around this death penalty case. And that involves legal research around the case and also developing community support for this guy. This guy, he got the death, he was originally sentenced to the death penalty in '82. He's had death penalty vacated twice, once for ineffective assistance of counsel and suppression of evidence, and then they reimposed the death penalty, and then he got it vacated again because the jury pool was tainted. There was systematic exclusion of black folks from the jury. And so now they want to re-sentence him again. They're not retrying the whole case, but they're just going through the re-sentencing phase. So they want to give him the death penalty again. So the efforts now are to stop that from happening, stop him from getting the death penalty again.
So going back to you, all the work that you're doing now and all the work that you started while you were inside and now that you're outside, what would you tell yourself as a juvenile after your first time spent in an institution? What would you tell yourself now?
Well, I think again, spontaneous. My presentation or engagement with these young people Thursday was, just tell the truth to them. I didn't have any prepared notes or, remarks made, but first I think it's important that you understand that not everybody is your friend. That whole peer pressure thing. You have to be able to determine who's a friend, who's not a friend, and your real friends are not those that's going to encourage you to get into trouble. Everybody got some sense of what's right and wrong. So if somebody asks you, hey, let's go do this, you know whether it's right or wrong or not. You just got to be able to say, no, I'm not going to do that. And that prison is not cool. A lot of guys, especially young boys, I think, but maybe girls too, and from all kind of media images and rap and stuff, they got this idea that it's cool to go to prison, it's cool to be in prison, and then you come out and you brag about, the whole rite of passage thing, like, nah, I'm a man because I've been to prison or something. And And so you get into that, there's nothing cool about being in prison, and there's no way, no reason whatsoever that justifies going, especially if you just out here running the streets and doing stuff you ain't got no business doing. And, this prison is not cool. And then they don't understand the actual reality of day-to-day life in prison, because the little TV programs don't really show all of that reality. And even the little stuff that they show it in a way that it doesn't make that hard kind of impact on people, because they still tend to glorify it and stuff, But, it's not fun to, it's not fun to go to SEG. It's not fun to be denied visits because somebody told me an incident once, saying, your sweater. You go to a prison wearing that, and of course they want to shake you down before you go in. So you raise your hands to get shook down. Your sweater rises up and your navel shows. Now, there have been incidents where people have been denied visits when that happens, because the people outside at the gate who are letting you in, they had the authority to deny you visits for stuff like that. And so that's kind of like part of a reality that people inside don't know about. Your visits, the daily shakedown, the kind of things that women go through in prison that men don't have to deal with.
What you mean, women who come to visit?
No,
women,
both.
or women who are incarcerated.
Right, women who are incarcerated. Everything, abuse by male or female guards, no privacy. You can't really take care of your hygiene. It's rough, which is another reason why we're trying to find some females to talk about what it's like for females to be inside. Because I just hear stuff since I ain't never been in a job. But, and the same thing for males, basically. Taking off your clothes. When you go for visits, going back and forth for visits, not going in, you might just get patted down. But coming out, you got to strip and bend over. And that's, you do so much time and you kind of get used to it, and you shouldn't get used to stuff like that, So that's all part of that dehumanization kind of stuff.
So do you feel more like you own your body, like you own who you are on the outside? Because you come and you go from where you live, it's no second guessing, it's no, you know what I mean? It's all
not yet. I'm still getting that,
Okay.
I'm still getting that. It wasn't, I don't know how long it was before I got out, but when you're inside, you talk about the things you want to do when you get out. When I used to drink Budweiser beer when I was, on the street. So one of the things I wanted to do was at least have, one Budweiser. I went in the liquor store one night around the house, and I bought a Budweiser, and I come out the store, and there was a police car out there, and I panicked, And then I had to cool myself out, and it took me a while to really cool out. I said, oh, man, you're all right. You're grown, it's legal. They're not looking at you. They're not worried about you. You're not going to say, you're not, So that kind of stuff. And when I first got out, I thought and in talking to other guys, everybody that I've talked to who's gotten out, and different guys have different kinds of things. Some guys couldn't ride public transportation at all. I'd have no problem doing stuff like that. I don't know. They just said they couldn't ride the bus or ride the L. They just couldn't do it. They tried. It might have been the crowd. Yeah, it was some scary stuff. I say one guy, that thing about the buses talking, that come from one guy. He got off the bus because when he heard the bus, calling out the next stop or something, he wasn't used to that. He didn't know that they did that. And I don't know, why he thought that the bus was really talking, but that's what he said, and he jumped off the bus. So that was then. He might ride the bus now once people explain, hey, that's, So, again, different guys have different kinds of things that they go through, I think, depending on, who they are and, like how long they've been locked up, where they were locked up at, kind of things they were doing while they were inside. So on one hand, you got to kind of, look at the individual thing. Certain kind of you can generalize that everybody coming out, especially if they've done a long, they done big time. Everybody coming out is going to need, 2-3 years to get more or less fully adjusted to being outside, I'm like 6-7 months now. And in a way, it's like I constantly feel tension. Like you say, I'm doing a lot of stuff. I feel that all the time. That's the tension I feel most. Doing a lot of stuff and the need to sit down a little bit. But I don't want to sit down, you know what I mean? So it's just how to keep doing stuff but not overwhelm myself with stuff. So that's a lot of stuff I want to do. So I just got to pace myself and, be a little bit more patient and all that. So.
Just as you gave advice to youth, what advice would you give to C numbers who are seeking parole? Because you had a lot of assistance, and you had the C numbers campaign, which evolved out of Fighting for Youth, which is now a larger organization. What about men who don't have that? What can make their fight easier? And taking that a step further, the second piece will be, what about men who don't have friends like you have who will help them re-enter and have a place to stay and things of that nature?
Well, let me say about two parts. First part is, part of what the campaign is doing is trying to make everybody aware of what process they should begin to use to try to influence the board to give them parole. And that's everything, my experience was I spent a lot of time talking to whatever board member was interviewing me because I wanted them to know who I was and not who that person was that they were reading about in that file. So over the course of years, you began to, convince people, I think, that you're not that person in the file no more. And they have to be convinced that, and it's not just, to me, it's not just a matter of, getting a college degree and, going to vocational school. I mean, you can do all of that stuff and still be a devil, you know what I mean? So, and you don't have to do all of that stuff and you can be an angel, so you have to know who the person is. And so that's my thing, is that guys going to the board have to show the board who they are. And they have to demonstrate an actual, a genuine transformation of themselves and show that they're not a threat and that they're going to, if you just want to get out and, fade into the woodwork, and just watch TV and, whatever, that's what you want to do as long as you're not breaking laws and you're dealing with your family, going to work, all that stuff. Cool, but again, a lot of guys want to come out and get involved in social kind of stuff. They want to work with kids or, they want to do some kind of community organizing and development and stuff. Again, everything legal, not, the radical days are gone, but, there are a lot of things out here to do, So that and one of the projects, the attorney project that we got, we're trying to find attorneys to represent guys. Having an attorney helps. Having a plan helps when you go to the board. Dealing with, we're trying to, over the course, gradually build up and be able to provide whatever resources guys need as they, to know what they need to do, how to do it, and to have this help, whatever help they need in terms of actually, getting in front of the board, trying to, convince the road. Then getting out, again, part of what the campaign is doing, part of what I'm doing, again, is networking right now. There are a lot of people out here. I'm trying to, meet as many people as I can, find out what they got going, what they're doing. And a lot of people are discussing, like I said, the need for this centralized kind of resource manual or something that can be provided not only to guys once they get out, know where to go to get this, but to try to hook it up maybe with the DOC, so that this is what the DOC hands to everybody coming out the door, so that they automatically know who's, cause I'm running into so many people, and they tell me, we got this program, we got transitional housing, you know, we got clothes, we got food, you know, we got a job thing here, and all this stuff is scattered, you know, because 10 people got 10 different programs, and you don't know unless you actually find yourself in that crowd where they're talking about this stuff. So, you know, you need some centralized kind of thing. So that's, you know, we're working on ways to, you know, help people to get out and then help them when they get out.
And one last thing I wanted to touch on was stereotypes of harm we introduce to society. I know for myself, we revisited Sayles, and also working with this with the C Numbers campaign helped me to break down stereotypes that people have of criminals and offenders and what they are and what they're like. And so a lot of people assume that ex-offenders are drug addicts or alcoholics, but I know you didn't have any drug, no addiction before, during, or after going in.
Well,
so
that ain't entirely
true.
I smoke, you know, so that's definitely an addiction.
Smoke marijuana?
No, cigarettes.
Okay. But that's not illegal.
I know, I'm just trying to bring a little humor in here.
Okay.
So, yeah, I got an addiction to cigarettes, but no, I didn't use drugs. I had no addictions to drugs, and I don't. You know, like I said, now, every now and then, since I've been out over the 7 months, you know, the people that I live with, they might, you know, invite some people over and they drink some wine with the dinner or something. Maybe a weekend I might buy a beer, you know, and that's, you know, that's it. And then it's, you know, so that's, I don't fear even, you know, going that way. But and it's a change and this, you know. But, and so I don't know, in terms of stereotypes, it's I know there are a couple. And I might have run into some two or three times, but unless people say something to me directly, I don't, you know, I try not to deal with it. But the whole criminal thing, there's an age thing that's real popular, or a down low thing, A's and or gay, or whether they run together or not, and that whole, you know, criminal. You know, you're a murderer. You were convicted for murder, so you still got those tendencies, or you liable to do that at any point in time. So, like I said, I don't know. I haven't personally, I don't think, run into that. But I think what happens with me is, again, where once people get a sense of who I am, hopefully they get that sense before they know anything about me having been in prison before, so that they won't automatically put up some defenses. You know, if you tell them first, they're gonna be more resistant to really trying to find out who you are or listen to what you're saying, because they're gonna, oh, this convict, you know, this murderer, this criminal, this, you know. So hopefully people get a chance to know me first. And then I have no real problem in saying, you know, this is what I did, but that's who I was. That's not who I am, you know. So.
So as we wrap up, is there anything that you just want to contribute or add or conclude in this conversation?
Oh, I just want to say that, hey, I wish every present and future member of the Prisoner Review Board would get like an orientation course in the differences between the old law and new law, the difference in philosophies, and, you know, a whole an agenda of things, a program to learn, so they would begin to look at each individual, like they say they look at each individual case, but, you know, they do and they don't, you know.
And apply each individual case to the applicable law.
Right. Use the standard that was in place when the guy got convicted, and not the standard that's been superimposed after everybody want to get tough on crime and bring in the retributive justice and all that kind of stuff.
And now look at the fact that this person may have changed.
Right. And again, it's no longer that. That's like the main criteria. If you're looking at somebody that you really believe that they're going to commit another crime, if you can't be confident in that, okay, cool. But they're looking at people that they feel confident in terms of, well, I know this guy, I believe this guy, I don't think that this guy will go out and commit another crime. If that's how you feel, let him go. That's it. That's it.